I'm James from Bike Lock Wiki, and in this video we're comparing the Velo Pro 509 to the Kryptonite Evolution 790. As always, we start our test by dropping either lock 5 times from shoulder height, which is roughly 1.6 meters. This gives us an idea of how either lock will stand up to the inevitable knocks and drops that it will receive throughout its lifetime. The Velo Pro 509 took a good few knocks. On the 4th drop, the outer plastic cover surrounding the keyhole broke off and the top of the mechanism housing split, but the lock continued to work as it should, but slightly brittle plastic here. The Kryptonite Evolution 790 up next, and on the 2nd and 3rd drops, either side of the black plastic casing broke off. Unfortunately, the 790's keyhole cover is contained within this plastic, so the keyhole cover was now unusable, unlike the Velo 509, which houses its keyhole cover inside the mechanism. Other than that, the lock worked fine, and apart from a few small dings and scratches, there's not much else to mention here. Next up, the hammer test, which isn't necessarily an attack that would be used on the street, but provides valuable insight on how well protected locking mechanisms are, and can also expose issues with poor hardening processes. As we saw in the drop test, the Velo Pro 509's plastic housing is brittle, and when struck with a hammer a few times, it broke up, but this is only cosmetic damage. On one strike, the metal ring around the keyhole cover split slightly, but this section doesn't affect the security of the lock. And despite several heavy hits, none of the rivets seized up and the lock continued to work as it should afterwards. Kryptonite Evo 790 up next, and after 10 solid hits on all areas of the lock, some of the plastic housing was damaged, but the orange plastic used here is more durable than the 509's, and it didn't splinter in the same way, with the Kryptonite Evolution 790 continuing to work as it should afterwards. A good performance from both locks so far. 24-inch bolt cutters are commonly used by thieves. They're small enough to be easily concealed for use on the street and can compromise a surprising number of low-quality bike locks. There's not a whole lot to show you here, but both locks performed very well in this test and shrugged off the attack. There was a small crack in the plate of the Evolution 790, but not much else to report on here. Ultimately, neither of these locks are going to be compromised with a pair of bolt cutters of this size. 42-inch bolt cutters are considered to be the largest readily available pair on the market, and as you can see here, they're far too cumbersome to be concealed for use on the street. So instead of being a realistic method of attack, this test is designed to provide further insight into how resistant either lock is to cropping attempts, since the 24-inch bolt cutter test didn't show much difference between the two locks. The Velo Pro 509 to start, and from the beginning I could tell this was going to be tough to cut. After 2 minutes I gave up, and as you can see there's a fairly substantial mark on the plate, but the jaws didn't quite make it the full way across the steel plate. We'll come back to this later. Having started with the Velo Pro 509, I could straight away tell that the Kryptonite Evolution 790 felt easier to crop with these larger bolt cutters. The arms of the cutters closed in slightly, which either means I'm breaking the bolt cutters or the lock is being cut. Eventually, after nearly 2 minutes, the hardened steel plate gave way. Still a good performance here from the 790, but beaten by the 42-inch cutters in the end, showing that the plates are slightly less resistant to bolt cutter attacks than the Pro 509's. Impressive resistance from both locks here, especially the Velo Pro 509, but again, remember this is not an attack that would happen on the street due to the large size of the cutters. The rivets of a folding lock can be attacked using several different methods. I normally conduct this test with a pair of 24-inch bolt cutters, since this is an attack that thieves will utilize on the street. However, my previous testing of high security folding locks has showed their plates are normally too chunky around the rivet to fit into the jaws of the 24-inch bolt cutters, and as you can see, both of these locks didn't quite fit inside. The Velo Pro 509's plates are slightly narrower around the rivet, measuring 23.1 millimeters wide, whereas the Kryptonite Evo 790's actually widen around the rivet at 27.1 millimeters wide. This makes them even more resistant to bolt cutter attacks, especially with smaller pairs of bolt cutters. So again, despite not being an attack that thieves would necessarily use on the street, I used the 42-inch bolt cutters to clamp down on either lock's rivets and find out if either lock would be able to survive. As mentioned, the circumference of the Kryptonite Evo 790's rivet area is larger than the Velo Pro 509's, which meant that the jaws and therefore the arms of the cutters were very wide open when cutting the 790, and despite using my full body weight, I couldn't get them to close at all. Upon inspection, after over 2 minutes, the protective rivet armour, in this case a large metal washer, had done its job by squashing and spreading across the rivet, preventing the blades of the bolt cutters from contacting the internal rivet. Great resistance here from the Evo 790. Due to the slightly narrower width of the Velo Pro 509's rivets, I was able to get better leverage on the arms of the bolt cutters and exert my full body weight onto the jaws. That to one side, I was still unable to crop the rivet. The internal washer, which is smaller and chunkier than the 790's flat washer, appeared unscathed upon inspection, so it seems the rivet was strong enough to hold my entire body weight without shearing in half, which does happen with smaller folding locks as we've seen in previous videos. Great resistance from both locks here, exactly what we like to see. No chance of cropping these rivets on the street with bolt cutters. HSS or high-speed steel hacksaw testing gives us a good indication of how well a lock has been hardened. Hardening is a crucial element of lock manufacturing as it dictates how strong a lock is and how well it will resist many forms of an attack. The Velo Pro 509 up first, and after a few swipes of the hacksaw blade, I could feel a clean cut beginning to form in the steel plate. Despite being sped up, you can clearly see the HSS blade cutting deep into the plate of the Velo Pro 509, and after 1 minute 15 seconds, I was able to cut cleanly through the plate, compromising the lock and exposing a hardening issue with the 509's plates. Now this was a real surprise since other Velo locks I've tested in the past have excelled in the hacksaw test. As mentioned though, these locks are pre-production models that Velo sent over. I've since let Velo know about their performance in this test, to which they replied that they'd be working to improve their hardening process for production versions of the Pro 509. With that in mind, we'll have to run a repeat of this test in the future to see if they manage to improve the cutting resistance of the plates. With this subpar performance, I was now very keen to see how the Kryptonite Evolution 790 would compare. Using a new hacksaw blade, I began cutting the lock. After several swipes, I could tell the blade was struggling to bite into the plate, with the hardened exterior making it very difficult to hold the blade in place. Upon inspection, after over 2 minutes of cutting, I'd hardly made a mark on the plate. And since hacksaws are compact enough for covert use on the street, it's great to see this performance from Kryptonite here. Do bear in mind that this test is conducted in lab conditions. I'm using a vise to hold either lock still and allow me to saw with both hands, so rather than being an indicator of how resistant these locks would be if attacked on the street, this test allows us to compare the quality of either lock's hardening and their resistance to saws. That said, the HSS hacksaw test clearly shows that the Kryptonite Evolution 790's plates have been through a superior hardening process compared to the Velo Pro 509's. Finally, angle grinder testing. Before we begin here, cyclists need to understand that almost any lock without anti-grinder protection can be cut in under 30 seconds. So if you ride an e-bike or a high valuable bicycle that's likely to be targeted by thieves if left unattended, you may want to consider a lock that offers protection against power tools. We recently released a review covering angle grinder resistant bike locks for anyone that's interested. For the angle grinder test, I cut each lock 5 times with a new grinder disc and a fully charged battery to provide an average cut time. Up first, the Velo Pro 509, which was slightly more resistant to cutting than I thought it would be, with an average cutting time of 13.04 seconds over 5 cuts. Next, the Kryptonite Evolution 790, which I had assumed would be equal to or more resistant than the Velo, but after the first cut I could tell this wasn't going to be the case. Over the 5 cuts, this averaged 6.79 seconds. I have my suspicions, but I'm interested to hear your opinions on why the Velo Pro 509 was nearly double as resistant to grinder attacks here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now online, you'll see both of these locks claiming to be suitable for use with e-bikes. As you've just seen how quickly folding locks can be cut, hopefully you understand why I don't recommend using a folding lock to secure e-bikes or high-value conventional bicycles, as these are priority targets for thieves. Folding bike locks are typically designed to offer a good blend of security and portability and are more compact and therefore portable than other types of bike lock. Both of these locks are towards the chunkier end of the scale and weigh almost exactly the same. The Kryptonite 790 weighs in at 1.44 kilos on its own and 1.6 kilos with its mount, while the Velo Pro 509 comes in at 1.51 kilos on its own and again 1.6 kilos with the mount. Now 1.6 kilos is fairly substantial for locks of this size, but for a folding bike lock to be both versatile and secure, this will typically result in a heavier lock due to the larger amount of metal utilised by each plate. As mentioned, another reason cyclists may opt for a folding lock is their versatility when it comes to locking your bike. Since these locks feature a flexible shackle, they're able to flex around and secure your bike to larger immovable objects than most U-locks. This is exceptionally convenient when you're locking in an area that doesn't offer conventional bike parking facilities. The Velo Pro 509 does offer slightly more internal locking space than the Kryptonite Evolution 790, with its internal shackle space measuring 12.9 by 26.7 centimeters, whereas the Evo 790 is slightly smaller with an internal locking area measuring 12.8 by 25.9. The difference here, however, is fairly negligible, but if you're locking a chunkier bike, you may need that extra bit of space. As you're well aware of by now, folding locks use a series of metal plates connected together by several rivets. The Kryptonite Evolution 790 uses 5.47mm thick plates, which as displayed during destruction testing offer good resistance to blunt impact, cropping and sawing attacks. As you saw, the 790 was only cropped by our 42-inch bolt cutters, but to reiterate, these are far too big for covert use on the street, and this test was only conducted to provide insight into the difference between the bolt cutter resistance. The Velo Pro 509 utilizes 5.45mm steel plates, which resisted both the 24 and 42-inch bolt cutters, but was cut quite easily with the hacksaw. As already mentioned, the plates of this lock are slightly wider at 23mm wide, compared to the 790 at 21.8mm. This provides the Pro 509 with increased resistance against cropping attempts because it simply puts more metal in the way of the jaws of the bolt cutters. When it comes to security ratings, both of these locks offer the Sold Secure Pedal Cycle Gold rating, which means in Sold Secure's words that they offer resistance against a dedicated tool list. Now this statement is fairly ambiguous and doesn't mean much to the average cyclist, but as you saw in our testing, both locks put up a good amount of resistance against the majority of the tools used. The Kryptonite Evolution 790 also holds ART 2-star certification. ART are another security testing organisation based in the Netherlands and provide a similar service to Sold Secure. The Velo Pro 509 doesn't hold the 2-star ART certification, but this is most likely because it hasn't been submitted for testing with ART. On the subject of security ratings, if you're considering either of these locks and have a bicycle insurance policy, or if your home insurance covers your bike, I advise you check the small print and find out if your policy requires you to use a certain level of lock. Sold Secure Pedal Cycle Gold locks will normally be compliant with most policies, but make sure to check as ratings required do vary. When it comes to locking cylinders, both of these locks use a slider cylinder. The Kryptonite 790 is slightly smoother to operate. This is mainly due to the automatic keyhole cover that the Velo Pro 509 uses, whereas the keyhole cover on the Evo 790 is manual, so you'll need to remember to close it each time after locking up. Keyhole covers help to prevent dirt and debris from building up inside the locking mechanism. I advise cleaning your lock's mechanism every month or so, depending on use. For anyone interested, I've put together a separate video that shows how to properly clean and lubricate any bike lock to get the most out of it and prevent it from jamming in the future. Both locks utilize automatic locking mechanisms, which means when they're first unlocked, the spring-loaded cylinders remain in the open position until the locking plate is reinserted into the mechanism. Auto-locking mechanisms greatly improve the ease of use of either lock, meaning minimum fiddling is required when locking up. Both locks also offer a rotating locking mechanism. This may not mean much to you at the moment, but if you've used a folding lock without this functionality, you'll understand why this is so beneficial, as it allows you to rotate the mechanism to the angle required and means you won't be fighting against your lock to secure your bike. One nice feature that Velo offer is keyless-like cylinders, which gives you the ability to unlock multiple locks with one set of keys. A nice feature which is very helpful for those who share bikes or big families who lock multiple bikes together. Both locks are supplied with multiple keys, meaning you can keep a spare somewhere safe in case you lose your main key. The Kryptonite 790 comes with 2 keys, whereas the Velo Pro 509 is supplied with 4 or 6 keys if you order the keyed-alike version. Replacements for either lock can be ordered using the key codes, which are found on the base of the blade of the 790's key and on the detachable key card on the Velo Pro's keys. I do advise taking note of the key code when using a new lock for the first time, as this is a great way to ensure that you'll always be able to order replacement sets even if you lose all of your keys and the key card. As with all folding locks, these two are supplied with mounting systems, which can be attached to your bike using the mounting screws or using the straps provided to mount wherever you like. Both mounts have their benefits. The Kryptonite Evo 790's mount is spring-loaded and uses a double latch system to hold the lock in place. Pressing the orange button on the side of the mount pops the arms of the mount open, providing quick and easy access to your lock. For anyone interested, once the lock is stowed away inside, the mount does make a slight rattling noise when riding, especially on bumpier surfaces. The Pro 509's mount uses a durable silicone strap to hold the lock in place. Unlike some other folding locks I've used, it's not a challenge to close this strap, and when stowed away, despite not being completely silent, the Velo Pro 509 is slightly quieter than the 790. One really cool feature that the Velo mount offers is a covert AirTag mounting slot, allowing you to track your bike with any tracker that fits inside. Despite being featured on the Traylock FS580, Traylock being one of Kryptonite's sister brands also owned by Allegion, we don't see AirTag or bike tracker compatibility with the 790. Now, it's all well and good buying a top-of-the-range folding bike lock, but you won't get the best out of it if you don't know the most secure way to use one. When locking your bike with any bike lock, you should always prioritize securing the most expensive components first. This is nearly always the frame and rear wheel. You should also attempt to fill the shackle of a folding lock with as much as your bike as possible, which gives thieves less room to play with if they attempt to steal your ride. From here, if you want to further increase the security of your bike, use a cable extension to secure your front wheel or other components such as your saddle. Both of these locks are compatible with cable extensions, and while cables don't add much protection against heavy tools, they can be useful in deterring the opportunist thief. While the push for sustainability has taken a back seat in recent times, I'll continue to monitor what brands are doing for anyone interested. The Kryptonite Evolution 790 comes with cardboard packaging, which is easily recyclable. As mentioned already, the Velo Pro 509 locks I received are pre-production samples, and sadly they didn't come with any retail packaging, but Velo confirmed to me that just like their other locks, these will be shipped in easily recycled cardboard packaging. Good to see and great to hear that both brands are using recyclable packaging, but both companies could be doing more to reduce their overall environmental impact and providing consumers with transparency on their aims and any progress here. With security and practicality out of the way, price is the last factor we'll take a look at. Folding bike locks are typically more expensive to produce than other types of lock due to the increased amount of machining work required to assemble each finished unit. Additionally, the Sold Secure Pedal Cycle Gold rating is the highest security rating at the time of publishing this review that Sold Secure have awarded to a folding bike lock, so this also adds to the cost. At the time of publishing this review, the Kryptonite Evolution 790 can be found online for $140 or just over £100, whereas when released, the Velo Pro 509 will be retailing at $130 or £90 for UK customers. Both fairly expensive, but if you do want the most secure locks in any category, these will typically cost more than their weaker counterparts. To summarise, both locks displayed strengths and weaknesses during destruction testing, but ultimately due to the Velo Pro 509's performance during the hacksaw test, it's currently less secure than the Kryptonite Evolution 790. Despite being slightly cheaper than the 790, I'd recommend waiting until Velo have addressed the hardening issue with the plates. As mentioned, I'll be running a follow-up test on the Pro 509 to ensure that this issue is properly addressed when Velo get back to me, so stay tuned for that. Additionally, as mentioned, the 509 is yet to hit the shelves. The release date will be late February or March 2026. If you're interested in purchasing either of these locks, you can find links in the description below with the most up-to-date pricing, along with other key information on either product. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions regarding either product, let me know down below and I'll get back to you. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.